welcome everybody to this second call. I hosted already a webinar last month. The first webinar was about really the connection of risk strategy and trust. We focused on what silence means, fear, pressure that still block escalation and risk management across industries. And today we're going to dive a little bit deeper on leadership blind spot. I've gathered quite a fair bit of data ahead of this call. And we are going to look through a little bit of the book and then go through the Q&A as we've done last time. So in terms of housekeeping, same format for those of you who joined last time. 5-10 minutes of you hearing me talking. Please feel free to ask any question as we go. You can use the Q&A function for that preferably, or use your chat. I think I received feedback last time if I could do it without the webinar. I wanted to try again this time around, depending on the number of participants. Because if there are too many people on the call, then it becomes a little bit difficult to manage. Next time around, depending on the number of participants, I might come back to a normal call. There are 4 events planned till the end of the year. The next one is in November, with the last one planned in December. If I don't have the answer straight away, I will come back to you. If we don't have time, as it happened last time, to cover all the questions you have, I will respond back offline and include that into the article I will publish on the back of this event. Yes, the event is recorded and will be made available offline as well, as I've done with the previous one. So if you don't have time to go through, or if you want to see some colleagues want to join afterwards, they can. I would share a one-pager. In fact, it was a little bit more than a one-pager last time, an article that summarizes the key point of discussion and key takeaways and the data point. I will be running also a couple of poll surveys during the event. You can find more information about the book here. So if you go on that QR code, you will be redirected on a website of Risk Books. You can find more information about the book and also buy it if you're interested. At the end of this call, I will ask you to, if you can take 1 or 2 minutes to provide feedback on how it went and what you want to cover. Some of the feedback I've already integrated, hopefully this time around. So please take the time if you can, because that's very useful for me to just tweak a bit the way the event runs. And finally, since the last time, I've launched the CPD Masterclass, which is connected to the Risk Within. The first half-day session is planned on the 10th of February. So if you want to have more information, you can visit my website, Aevitium.com. And I will also provide you with some more information as well in my newsletter, as well as a discount code for the first session. So with that, I think now we start having quite a few people on the call. I will actually get you to work a little bit and start with the first poll survey, just to get us in the mood. I'm launching it now. Hopefully you can see it appearing on your screen. When meetings are quiet in your organization, what does silence usually mean? And I worked in a lot of organizations. It could translate it to very different ways. So let's see what you guys have to say about it. 1 answer, 2 answers, 4, 5. It seems to be fairly spread. Yeah, no, there is one theme that seems to be coming back more. Couple of more answers. 10 more seconds. If you have not responded yet, you can. All right, so here are the results. Waiting for leadership cues. It's interesting because when I asked that same question on LinkedIn poll survey, I got a slightly different response, and we're going to talk about it today. Disengagement or fatigue. I'm glad to see that fear of speaking up is not necessarily something, clearly came back, some of you selected it, but it's not something so prevalent. And agreement and focus. So what it practically means is that it's anything but agreement and focus, except for a couple of people. And I think that's one of the core aspects we're going to talk about today on some of the leadership blind spot I've certainly experienced in my career, where people take silence for agreement. And a lot of the times, the aspect you see on the poll survey are really what prevents people from speaking up. This time I'm not going to forget to stop sharing. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Julien Haye. In my day job, I'm a Chief Risk Officer for a fintech. I think we have some member of the team on the call today. I say, hi, Emmanuel, I could see you were on the list of participants. I'm also a risk advisor, trustee, and non-executive director. For background, I'm also a former trader and a risk executive. The book, The Risk Within, is actually based on some of my experience here. I might have some news on the volume number 2, so I will come back to you perhaps in a few weeks on that once things are firming up, but seems to be going in the right direction. And my work focuses a lot on helping people from a cultural standpoint, a risk management standpoint, and the cultural aspect that really enable effective organization and strategy. And the book really came from that. Today's conversation is going to draw on 2 chapters of the book. In fact, I'm going to read a couple of passages from it, just to give you a little bit of background. And really it's about that learning mindset. What is a reaction of leaders when something goes wrong? And here I've seen really the good, the bad, and the ugly in organization. I've seen people asking to get the news and then being not exactly supportive on the back of that. And so one of the core aspects and principle, which is principle number 3 of the book, and I'm actually going to read a passage from the book now, is really about establishing and pushing that learning mindset that is so critical when something goes wrong, so that people are not afraid, firstly, to escalate, and secondly, know they're going to be supported in addressing the issues they're facing. And principle number 3, and I think I mentioned them last time, so I'm going to come back to one of them today. Organizations that prioritize psychological safety view failure as an opportunity to learn and grow rather than a punishment. This creates an environment that encourages individuals and teams to take calculated risk and learn from mistakes. This principle is really about establishing a learning mindset and aligning your organization and governance to act as a catalyst to such mindset. And it's critical from my perspective that both leadership and the risk management function really help the organization in leveraging and learning setbacks. Some of you might have seen I published a recent article on the anti-fragile organization based on Nassim Taleb's notion of fragility and anti-fragility. That learning and ability to turn setback into an opportunity is fundamental, really, to really establish organization and culture that go beyond resilience. So setback, learning from setback, tone and alignment really determine whether the information flow will happen or will stall. And last time I think I used, and I'm going to use it again, the example of Archegos. In the context of Archegos and Credit Suisse, the information was available internally within Credit Suisse. It didn't go anywhere, and the organization lost $5 billion as a result of the failure of that particular hedge fund. One thing that came back, and I will go through some of the data points later on the poll survey that I run on LinkedIn, is that leaders have a tendency to misread what silence means in a meeting, and I think you already provided some of this insight in there. And delegate accountability unevenly, and that's some of the aspects I also cover in the book. It's not enough to say you're in charge of risk management or you're the risk owner. You also need to enable people to do that. And I provide some of the ingredients required in the book around having the resources, the capability, the capacity, the space to actually even learn and address any setback. And the worst situation that can happen is for leaders to react defensively, and that actually completely stalls then escalation of issues and risks. So from a context standpoint, a blind spot is not ignorance, right? It's not, they don't necessarily want, and I've seen that a lot, they don't want to help, but it's a little bit overconfidence in one's awareness. We know who we are, but we don't really see some of the aspect and personal attribute that can prevent and make other people react in a certain way. And in risk leadership, it shows up as mistaking calm rooms for aligned teams, People are not speaking up, so everybody agrees. No, this is not the case. Usually it actually means pretty much the opposite. Confusing assigned ownership with real accountability. The fact that you said to someone, you own at risk that problem, you're going to fix it, doesn't mean they can, and they will. And in fact, a lot of the time I've seen they can't. Believing transparency exists because you asked for it once is not the way it works. Asking something and not actually pushing it and embedding it from a cultural standpoint usually actually achieve the exact opposite. So these are cultural, not procedural issues, and they really define how well risk and risk framework will perform under pressure. Again, I will invite you to ask any question you might have using the Q&A or the chat as we go. With that, I'm going to run the second poll survey before I give you some of the data points I raised over the past few weeks in preparation of this call today. So here is a second poll survey for you. I'm going to have a quick sip of coffee. What most strengthens trust after someone raises bad news? Nine, 10, 11, 12. Couple of more responses. 5 more seconds. 14. All right, we have a tie. Actually, no, we don't. Last responses came through, so no blame or defensiveness, and that's very much aligned as well to what was gathered on LinkedIn as well. The timely follow-up actions. If something really bad happened, and for example, the person in charge needs resources and nothing happens on the back of that, you can be sure it's going to create some problems later on, right? So leadership visibility, I'll be interested to understand why people raise this one, but clearly we can't have that two-way discussion today. So happy for you to get to raise some of the points on the chat. No blame or defensiveness, I think. For some reason, it's there twice. Sorry, I made a mistake. So for me, the notion of supporting the organization and supporting the people who work for you, again, really foster that learning mindset that is so critical for the organization. And so when I ask those questions online, and for background, by the way, I gathered about 2,400, I was counting them before the call, data points over the weeks through poll surveys on LinkedIn on multiple facets of those questions. And so I've asked, what's the biggest risk when silence is mistaken for agreement? And close to 40% of respondents, it was about 150 respondents, said that the biggest risk is team disengagement. So people are nodding but then doing nothing practically on the back of it. Then what do leaders most underestimate about middle managers? And over 40% of respondents say competing demands, and anyone who's been in that position of middle management will know that the entire organization actually rely on them to make sure things are ticking. But yet the level of support they get might be very limited. Then what creates the biggest gap between aside and real accountability? Again, over 40% of people said that there are too many owners. So when you have too many people owning the thing, then no one owns it. And as a result, finger pointing, right? People are turning toward the other to wait to see what the others are going to do. So nothing is practically happening. 28% with the same question said conflicting priorities. And 26 says no decision rights, which come back to the point that if you assign a problem to someone but don't give them the ammunition to actually deal with it, then nothing is going to happen. What's the biggest leadership blind spot in encouraging challenge? And that aligns to the response we just get. 43% of people responded that defensive reactions clearly impede complete dialogue. And 27% said that silence, they equate as silence equal agreement, which clearly is not. So false harmony is more dangerous than open dissent. The notion of psychological safety is not grounded in the fact that there's no conflict. In fact, having conflict and open conflict and the ability to resolve them within a culture is fundamental for it to work properly. It's not about everybody agreeing with everything, because realistically no one really does. It's about creating that environment where people can raise their challenge, sometimes disagree openly, but having the ability to do that and resolve the issue behind. The last thing you want is people disagreeing in the background, saying nothing, and then say nodding during the meeting and go and do the exact opposite in the background, which I've seen many, many times. And finally, when leaders hear bad news, so what shapes whether your team raises risks again after bad news? Follow-up actions, 56%. Again, several hundred people responded to this one, fairly aligned to what you guys responded as well. Trust depends on what leaders do after hearing the message. If a bad news arrives and then nothing happens, or worse, the resolution starts taking place somewhere else, that completely impedes trust. So thank you, Mel, for raising your point. So sharing comprehensive lesson learned and what we have done with this learning really helps encourage people to be much more open. Good incident management and identifying new controls, understanding root cause also influences people. Yes, completely agree. From a leadership standpoint, the one thing I will always start with is, firstly, acknowledge the issue and understand and thanking people for raising it. Secondly, asking them what they need to actually help them go through the resolution. And sometimes also help them prioritize as well, right? The point on conflicting priorities that came back, I've seen it. And in fact, the risk function can be very much guilty of pushing too many things to too many people across an organization. So having that, ability to prioritize and help people prioritize their own activities is quite important. Any questions so far? I'm going to take a little bit of a breather and a sip of coffee. Please feel free to ask any questions you might have. There are a lot of data, by the way, raised in here, so I will share that offline afterwards. So what does that mean from a risk visibility standpoint? One, and I can only repeat that, and in the book I come back to it quite often, silence is not agreement. Silence is just that, silence. It can mean anything and everything. It can mean people are afraid to speak up, and that comes back a lot in some of the poll surveys I run. Sometimes people simply don't know, are not there, right? That can be also happening. Sometimes they simply don't want to raise a problem because that means another problem to add to the long list of things they need to do. They don't know how to address them, and so they'd rather say nothing. And I don't know if you had that experience from a managerial standpoint, but I certainly did, where I discovered a number of problems that had been buried by people who didn't know how to resolve them, and then they only surfaced the moment they left. That has happened a lot. At least I've seen that a lot in my career, whether with people reporting to me or others. Mel, does the book cover key ROIs to measure risk culture and specifically psychological safety? Yes, it does. In fact, the book provides some roadmap and methodological aspects and ideas to improve psychological safety, but also to improve risk culture more widely, how to deal as well in multicultural environment, because that has a major impact on some of those aspects, how to deal with change, which is one of the things I'm going to cover in the last few minutes, etc. So the short answer is yes to that question. And so being not aware of that from a leadership standpoint means that escalation is either delayed. Usually it's delayed because one way or another problems will surface. If they are delayed, usually in the worst possible way. We can foresight as well, because it should be possible to anticipate some of those problems, especially in an environment that is very unpredictable, connected as we're seeing today. The ability and trust that is some fundamental to drive the organization must be there. If you don't have that trust in an environment, especially in which we operate today, I will be very concerned for the ability of the organization to see what's going on really on the ground and the issues they're going to face. Melvina, how should leaders balance a focus on risk, but also experimentation, which can be key in a certain environment? Completely agree. In fact, for me, and if you read the book, and I know you're actually reading it because you and I talked about it not long ago, the ability to create an environment that is safe and psychologically safe is also fostering risk-taking. So it's not necessarily about preventing risk in that context. It's actually enabling the organization to take risk, to innovate. And I give quite a number of examples in there from organization, but also my own background on the trading floor. As a trader, I was paid to take risk. Our ability to make the right decision was predicated on the fact that we could challenge each other and really have a very comprehensive view of the environment we operated in. And that means we were really challenging each other on what is the rationale, on which basis are we making this decision? Is that really the right decision? And I've seen that, and again, I give several examples of that in the book, where creating that safe environment where people can question each other on the decision they're making is fundamental to get a 360 view on the potential impact and things we might not see because no individual has all the answers. So hopefully it answers the question you asked. Some of the questions I also had prepared. How can leaders turn defensive reaction into learning moments? The short answer for me on this one is ask people what they need to resolve a problem and how can you support them. Just asking that will really help. So position yourself not as saying something went wrong, that's bad, blah, blah, blah. It's more something went wrong. Firstly, how important or critical is that? Do we need to fix that problem or no? Shall we park it so that we don't add something else to the list? And if we decide to prioritize that issue, what do we need to actually, and what does the people who are in charge of fixing the problem need to fix it? What signals show that assigned accountability isn't working? Well, there are several signals. One is if issues are not being raised. So some of the work I've done in previous organization was to flush out the departments where issues were actually not raised, and to compare notes across the organization to see whether operational issues, processing department, for example, did not raise any issues. That's usually not right because you will expect some problems there. The other thing is when you see recurring issues, which I've seen as well. So in an organization I worked for, every year the top department that had the most issues came back with the same problem and again and again and again. And when we started drilling into it, what it turned out is that they knew what the problem was, but the management had decided they will not prioritize remediation sitting behind a transformation that was required. And so as a result, they were left with a problem and no means to address it. And so assigned accountability here translated into repeat issues simply because the people in the hot seat couldn't do anything about them. And for me, that's an example I give a lot in the book and how to address that. And it's a very big deterrent to have a proper culture and to make sure it works. How do you protect middle managers from being cultural blockers and absorbers? Firstly, by recognizing the role they play in an organization. I certainly use the term permafrost, and there are several ways to describe in a non-positive way that layers. And I changed my mind when I ended up in that situation, simply because I could see how unheaded this group is. And the amount of administration and frankly, waste of time that is being asked from that group is just mind-blowing from time to time. So for me, it's about giving them the tools and simplifying them and giving them the capacity and space to actually be part of the solution. If you don't do that, then you probably put them in a situation where they can't absorb more anyway, so they will say, yes, we're going to do it, and then nothing happens, or they are going to try to do it, and then something else will be dropped, or they won't do a good job. Whatever happens, it's not going to be positive. So for me, the core point that can be done is really to have that mid-layer in giving them capacity and space to actually do what they should be doing, and remove the noise and admin that is being pushed onto them. Just checking the time. Still have time for a couple of more questions. If you have any more questions on your side, please ask. When silence dominates meetings, what's one behavior you'd model to surface dissent safely? Well, for those of you who've sat with me in meetings or in when I chair meetings, you will most likely have noticed that I systematically go through every single participant one by one and ask them questions and to contribute. So it's firstly open the dialogue and open the gate so that people can voice what they think. And usually when I'm not sure that people have said what they really meant, then I will start asking more questions. My objective is not to put them on the spot. My objective is really to create a space where people need to raise what they have to raise. And yes, I'm a big fan of recognizing that when I make some mistakes, I have very little problem with that. But I can also see the limitation of that, right? The notion of vulnerability is useful to a point, and there's a point where it becomes quite detrimental as well. So I think raising this point and being transparent in the end, that's about that, and giving the permission for people to speaking up. Finally, in the last minute, after failed escalation, what visible follow-up builds up confidence fastest? So, in fact, it's a very good question, this one, in a sense that, firstly, acknowledging that something was not raised, and sitting down with the impacted parties to understand what is required to fix a problem if it requires urgent fixing. And if that is done, then go back to them and ask them as well what will have helped them escalate the problem faster. I will not ask why they did not escalate. I will ask them what will help them to escalate issues going forward faster. It's reframing the questions here. Same intent, same objective, asked slightly differently, where again, I position myself as an enabler rather than someone who's questioning. And words here matters in creating trust and the ability for people to raise concerns. So with that, we are out of time. Thank you very much for everyone for joining today. I will leave you with 3 practical shifts. Firstly, make your response observable. Thank candour and close the loop publicly. Clarify ownership, number 2. State who decides and why. 3, treat silence as data. And if you work in an organization where only 50% of your people are responding to your employee survey, it says something, and usually not exactly positive. So use silence treat silence as data. What are we not hearing and why? Ask yourself that question and really challenge yourself in going on the ground to understand what's going on. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for your participation today. Please complete the feedbacks questionnaire at the end if you can. And with that, I look forward to seeing you at the next session. And don't hesitate to contact me offline if you want to continue the discussion. I wish you all a fantastic day and speak to you guys soon.